Oh, fuck's sake.
What else has happened?
Oh, just dropped something down the back of the chest of drawers.
Just cool bloody crazy.
Yeah, see, we're pros, mate, aren't we, Josh?
Does weird things.
Couple of real treats.
I've seen a bloody clean and snatch too. Yo, what's going on, guys? Rhys here from More Than Lifting with my good friend Chris Thatcher and fellow cohort. Do you want to say hi, Chris?
Hi, Chris.
Lovely. Today we're going to be talking about skills training. It's basically, skills are like the sum up of everything we've been talking about for a minute. So it's like the next step of your training. When you get into everything moving together, you want to move on to starting to develop these skills. And I'm not talking backflips necessarily. I'm talking things like handstands. I'm talking more strength and gymnastic based skills like levers and human flags and planches. I almost said them.
What's a lanch?
A lanch. It's I don't know.
Is it something between a lunge and a planche?
It's a straight leg lunge planche.
Do you say planche or planche?
I say planche. I guess it's just my accent. Some people say planche.
Planche.
I don't know, actually. I don't really know if people do say planche.
No, okay.
Yeah, they must do, man. They must do.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I think I say it. I think I say planche, but it's meant to be planche. But it's bath and bath, isn't it? So.
Yeah, but I still say bath because I'm not that weird.
And just alienated all of our northern listeners there.
Yeah, well, actually, you know what? I've got a good friend who's from Newcastle, right? And his name's Alex. And we always bully him, saying he sounds like he's from Yorkshire.
Is that like the ultimate insult to someone from Newcastle?
Apparently, I don't know that much about it, to be honest with you, but apparently it is.
Like any further south than Newcastle, and it's just an insult. Which is kind of, I suppose, when people come down south, you start picking on their northernness as if it's like, well, you live further north than Northampton, and therefore you're there for ridicule. So maybe. Yeah. Who knows? Anyway,
in America, you've got no idea what this is like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
they just hear that one
space.
Permanent accent.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I don't know. I think in Britain, the difference in accents is like greater than in America.
Oh, I don't know.
Actually, I've just thought about that, and you've got a couple of good ones, haven't you? You've got a couple of shiners in America, a couple of fucking good accents,
a couple of real treats. Yeah. You go deep south, and then you go to like New York or Washington or places like that. It's quite a departure.
Yeah. So we're not talking about skills as in funny accent development or anything like that. We're talking about muscle ups. We're talking about handstand push-ups, L-sits, like stuff like that. Okay, so it's
and sorry, from my side, I'll throw him into the mix because I think it applies much the same. The more, shall we say, complex Olympic lifts such as cleans and snatches, just because they require the same degree of
coordination,
cumulative effort from suppleness, strength, and stamina. There takes a lot to go into those things. Throwing a bar up into the air and catching it, and throwing it up and getting it into a position that would otherwise be impossible if you didn't have the requisite power, strength, and stability, much like you would for all those other gymnastics moves. So just those, what we call those higher level drills in either discipline.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think that's a good point as well. It does translate, and there are relevant skills. You wouldn't call them skills, but equivalent skills, at least in more like complex and compound weight training.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, as one very simple example, my handstand capacity is far improved by my ability to snatch because of the actual effort and intensity that I'm now placing on my shoulders. Yeah,
and I think like holding that weight with your arms and shoulders like locked like that, like you do, that translates almost perfectly to a handstand position as well when it comes to like core tension and stability around there, because you'll probably know from doing handstands that it like does weird things to your abs.
Very true, yeah.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I always say to that, when people ask about, what you're feeling or what's most intense in a handstand, I'm like, well, what I've found the most interesting is when I've sort of thought that I can walk away from a very heavy deadlift or superset a very heavy deadlift with handstands. And I'm literally shaking all over the place because, the core stress, or the stress around my sort of inner core, deeper core muscles, in particular lower back, doing a deadlift, then trying to put myself up into a handstand position or up against the wall, it's bloody hard, because you massively pre-fatigue one of the key areas. So it's not just about, my shoulders have had a rest because of the deadlift. It's like, well, no, actually my core's still recovering substantially from that effort. So it's a great way to learn about, what actually really hits quite hard in certain movements when you're not always consciously aware of it, doing them fresh, is to do something which pre-fatigues a particular group of muscles prior to actually going into doing that drill, because then you realise just what is actually working.
Yeah, like doing supersets or stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a mistake a lot of people make in the gym in particular, is trying to do, the wrong things next to each other. So they'll take it as a superset is just two completely different exercises. But, you can split that down into opposing muscle groups, so sort of fascic and tonic split, so front of the body, back of the body, so pressing and pulling, or you can shift it upper and lower. But even within those individual areas, there are certain things that are going to massively fatigue. Like, for example, you could put a pull-up and a deadlift next to each other, but the amount of work going on through the back and the lats and the grip and the biceps in the deadlift is massively underestimated. So you then go and try and smash out some heavy, either weighted pull-ups or, high rep pull-ups, trying to get out a kind of PB. It's going to be damn near impossible to do because the pre-fatigue from the deadlift is enormous. But, on paper...
and you'll feel it immediately as well. It's not like you'll get to like another 8 reps on your pull-up. Like, you'll do like 3.
Well, yeah, exactly. And it's not just the strength and stress element. It's obviously the cardiovascular and respiratory effort as well. So because you've actually maxed out, whether it's 1 rep, 3 reps, 5, or even 10, whatever it may be, you should be pushing to the utmost level of your capacity on that lift. If that's the intention, is to try and get the most out of it. So to then go and do exactly the same on the supersetted exercise, it's going to be tough. You're not going to get the most out of both lifts, and in fact, you're going to diminish the returns on both by putting them together. So there is a place for supersetting, but it tends not to be around higher skill, higher strength-based drills, because you're basically going to underperform on both.
Yeah. As on a side note to that, though, like the flip side, sometimes what I do is, because obviously a lot of calisthenics is very, very compound exercises, and when you get to a certain level, like pull-ups and dips, that's not all you want to do. You want to put yourself in more stressful kind of work and more like crazy exercises because it's fun. And what I tend to do a lot of the time is not supersets, because I think technically that's like 3 sets in it, that in a row. So what's a 2 set in a row? Like
no. So a superset in a conventional sense, a superset would be 2 exercises back to back.
Just 2.
Yeah, just 2.
What's 3 then?
Tricep.
A tricep, obviously. Yeah. What
and
a knob.
and then anything beyond that, you would probably just call a circuit. 4 exercises, 4 different exercises, one after the other. You would probably say is pretty much you're now into circuit training because you're not going to max out on any of those.
Yeah, and the exercises you'll have to do will like necessarily need to be lighter as well, because otherwise you'll be fucked.
Yeah, exactly. And what you've got to remember is the more exercises, the more diversity into the set, be it a superset, a tricep, or a circuit, the more diversity across a multiple range or higher range of exercises, the higher the endurance and stamina aspect is going to come into play, versus the other end where you just do one exercise supersetted maybe with some very low level mobility stretching drills or just complete rest. That's going to be much more strength/skill based. It's going to be the more complex lift, whether it be in terms of stress of strength and intensity on that aspect, or stress of skill and strength acquisition as well.
Yeah. Well, what I tend to do with these supersets, so it is supersets, is mix like a leg raise with an exercise. So I do my pull-ups, and I do like a pull-up with a leg raise, and then I do a pull-up with a leg raise, and I do 10 of them. and then I'll do dips with a supported leg raise. Yeah, because the mobility, like, and my strength in like an L set, I can basically kick myself in the face. So
Right.
like without like swinging, I'll like lift. Do you know what I mean? It'd be controlled. I'm not like doing a dip and then swinging my legs up or anything. It's like it's a press. So I'll do the dip, supported leg raise, like lock out my arms, engage and extend my scapula. Do you know what I mean? So I'll get right up, and then I'll bring my legs right through, nice and straight. Bash my knees and my nose, and come back down. And like, although you're doing opposite movements with the main rep, like the pull and the dip, obviously pull and push respectively, they're opposite movements, but mixing the core in with it, mate, it's exhausting. And by about 6 on the dip, I usually struggle to get to like past 45 degrees, like to get my feet above my head, let alone kick myself in the face.
Yeah, because there's a huge fatigue in your abdominal muscles, your hip flexors.
Yeah.
You know, but so when you do the pull-ups, you say that you do that with an L sit or leg raise as well. So you're doing a dynamic leg raise on both movements.
Yeah. So with the pull-up, obviously you could say that they're separate movements, because I do a pull, come down, leg raise, but it's done in a way that I'd never disengage my shoulders. So I never go to full dead hang with the and release my shoulders. So it's always active. My core and my back is always tight, and my arms always engaged, because I'm bringing my legs in as well with the leg raise. Like, everything is always tight. So it's like a very, very complex exercise that I'm doing by stringing 2 highly compound exercises together and then supersetting them with another one of the same complexity.
Yeah,
but the opposite movement.
That makes sense. But, you know,
it doesn't sound like it makes sense.
No, I'm with you now. So you're essentially, your pull up with your leg raise is you do the pull up, come all the way down to a full hang with shoulders still engaged. Then you lift the legs. Then you bring the legs up. Then you could bring the legs down. Then you go back up into the pull up. So you're literally up, down, leg raise, up, down, leg raise.
Toe tap, up, down, toe tap.
Toe tap, yeah, okay. But then with the dips, it's sort of top end, legs up, back down to the dip.
Yeah, well, I tend to do the dip first, because I do the pull up first. Yeah, so I'll dip, legs up, dip, legs up.
So you're lifting the legs while you're in the dip?
No. I'll do the
full
dip. It'll be like the pull up. I'll dip, and then I'll bring my legs up. I'll do the dip, get to the full like hyperextension, and then bring my legs up. Yeah. So it's still, you could like argue that they're separate movements.
Yeah.
But
it's not like a coordination skill exercise where you're trying to do 2 things at once. Like, for example,
no, because mechanically, it's like with a pull up, it's possible, because you kind of do that as like an upstart in gymnastics. But it's not. It doesn't take that much strength, because activating your core and bringing the legs up, like, almost gives you a load of momentum, and that swings you up over the bar. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, like, you have to isolate them. You could do like L-sit pulls or something like that. Like, that's no issue. But and you could do L-sit dips as well. But doing that dynamic movement with the dip, like your shoulders can't do it, because you get kind of kyphotic at the bottom of the dip, don't you? You're bringing your shoulders to the bar, and to do the leg raise, you need your shoulders fully like retracted. Yeah. And then do you know what I mean? To be able to get your bum forward and your back activated properly to press forward like that. Yeah. So it's just like it's just mechanically it's impossible.
Yeah. But it's possible in terms of, you know, what you're doing. You can superset 2 very large, complex, compound exercises with an additional movement interspersed in the rest space between each rep, just to kind of hit the abs because it's fun, you know, or something else to do. It's another way to challenge the body, but ultimately it's still more of what you would call a conditioning superset than a max strength or skill superset. Maybe slightly differently for gymnastics, because there is a requirement for routines to do multiple different movements, so therefore you're conditioning that skill per se. But transitioning that back to a gym environment, you wouldn't necessarily put those even dips and pull-ups together if you were trying to max out the pull-up or max out the dip, and you certainly wouldn't be putting in abdominal movements into those as well for anything less than just basic skill development or conditioning, stamina, pre-fatiguing particular muscles, just to kind of see what sort of response you get. So yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, the great thing is everything's possible. Like, the worst thing is that exercise gets really, really rigid. So when it comes to programming, people are like, well, I can only do these 2 exercises together. You can do everything. Like what I said before about, deadlifts and pull-ups going together. Well, you can do it. Like, there's no reason to say you can't do it. You've just got to be realistic about what the reason for doing that actually is. It's like we've talked about previously with programming. There has to be a goal, there has to be a purpose to the actual program itself. Otherwise, you're just doing exercise. There's no real rhyme or reason. And again, there can be a time for that as well. There can be a time where you just have some fun because you've done all your hard work, you've done your high skill work, your high strength work, the real high stressing stuff, and you've got like 15 minutes, you think, I really fancy having a little cardio blowout, or I just really fancy just kind of practicing some crazy stuff, or just, drilling in on my handstands for fun and just kind of seeing how long I can hold after all that work I've done. There's a time and a place for fun, but normally, particularly at the very beginning of your session, once you've warmed up appropriately and moved around a little bit and heated up, that's when you've got the capacity in your body to do the most demanding work possible. So that's where you've got to be very astute as to what you're looking to achieve from that day's training.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we go into the specifics of technical skill training, because we're on this kind of training, like endurance-y skill kind of mixture of training and everything all together, this is really good. And like, I think there are a lot of opportunities for different forms of neuromuscular development, doing things like deadlifts and pull-ups consecutively. Even though, yeah, you're right, and it would be more of like an endurance exercise, as you'd call it, but that'll translate to a lot of activation ability in your muscles as well. So, the point where we haven't actually got into yet, because we've been talking about all this other stuff, the point we haven't got into yet is that you do your skills training, your specific skills training at the beginning of your session.
Yeah.
All right, after the warm-up. And we'll talk about that in a second. But this training, and mixing exercises like this together are really good when you're doing specific training for skills, because you can only do your planche at the beginning of your workout because it's so exhausting. But when you get later on into more like strength stuff that you're doing, or you're getting towards the end of your session, what you can do is mix these kind of similar exercises together that you're not going to get high reps out of, and that doesn't really matter, but you can use that exhausted time when you're absolutely fucked and you're still trying to get a couple more pull-ups. You can use that to teach yourself to just squeeze reps in and squeeze more reps in, and it'll help you activate those muscles in coordination as well as you're more exhausted, and it'll translate to faster development of the skills that you can only normally do at the beginning of the session. So it is really useful to have that in your head as well, because developing that neuromuscular connection is super important.
Yeah, massively. I mean, just to give the sort of physiology of it, I can't remember.
I'm exhausted from that.
That was pretty full on. It was good. To give the physiology of it, this is something I try and instill in people all the time, is to, when you're writing your own programs, or if you're having programs written for you, it's really important to understand energy systems. It's really important to understand how the body functions, how it stores energy, how it then converts energy, and how it utilizes and takes on energy when you're actually active. So if you imagine at the very basic level of it, is that when you're at rest, when you've been eating, when you've been fueling, your body's storing energy. It's in form of ATP, so adenosine triphosphate. So it's effectively your body's capacity to take on all the energy you've taken in through oxygen, through food predominantly, and store it as essentially sugar and potential energy within the muscles. Now, that's the sort of stuff that you really want to utilize, as you said quite rightly, at the beginning of the session, in terms of your putting it into the highest skill, highest demand work. It's the stuff where you have the most explosive capacity. Think of it, if you were doing a 100-meter sprint, it's that energy system that's going to get hit into straight away. So it's why you can't then keep sprinting beyond a certain point, because that diminishes very, very quickly. So that's something.
And also, it's why your first sprint, or your first 2 or 3 sprints, are going to be a lot better than your 10th sprint or your 15th sprint.
Yeah, exactly. Because after a point, that you're literally exhausting that potential stored energy within minutes. it's over and done with very, very quickly within a training session. So you've really got to tap into the higher skill, higher strength, higher intensity, higher speed, higher power stuff that you want to derive from your workout at the beginning. Beyond that point, and this has been very simplistic about it, but I don't want to kind of get into it in too much detail. Beyond that point, ultimately what you're doing is utilizing oxygen. So that's where you have the difference between what we call anaerobic energy and aerobic energy, or anaerobic capacity and aerobic capacity. So anaerobic is essentially without oxygen, so it's your body's pre-stored energy from other sources. So like I said before, food predominantly. Then aerobic is where it becomes more oxygen based. So the classic mistake you can see people doing is doing a ton of cardio, be it running, doing a 20-minute on the treadmill, loads of intervals on the rower, even some.
And then doing weights.
and then going and trying to put their max bench press on, or do handstands or max pull-ups. And it's not to say you can't do it, but you've massively depleted the most appropriate energy stores for those particular activities. So,
by doing your run first.
Yeah, exactly.
Or by doing an extended run first. There's a little warm-up, it's not so bad.
Yeah, like a very, very low level, sort of little bit of couple of minutes on a bike. I mean, this is why I like mobilization and stretching work, because once you've done a very dynamic mobility warm-up, everything's kind of prepped and ready to go, to the point that you don't necessarily feel you need to do the cardio. In fact, the cardio early on, particularly something as pounding as running, can be quite self-defeating because you've not actually done much of a warm-up before you've got, people get straight in the treadmill and start pounding around, and you've not kind of let your joints and muscles lubricate appropriately and warm up to the extent that they need to kind of do any pounding or any sort of real activity at all. And people go straight into it thinking, well, this is just a warm-up. And it's like, well, nothing's really just a warm-up. It's much better to do the prep work, the mobilization, the foam rolling like we talked about before you get into that. But coming back to the sort of program and the energy systems, it's why really you want to put any sort of cardiovascular, some sort of testing based work in terms of endurance and stamina much more to the back end of the program, and obviously the high skill strength work at the very, very beginning. And that's because of how our bodies respond or act physiologically speaking. Biologically speaking, we're designed to do very short, sharp bursts of high stress, high intense, high strength and skill work, from pre-stored energy, and then everything else is just based on our body's capacity and ability to utilize oxygen and effectively make that into the energy we then continue to use through. So it's why it's really important to have that, like we talked about before, having great high stamina capacity, because you're only going to be as strong as your heart and lungs are, because obviously up past a certain point it's all about the oxygen, it's all about the ability to take in as much as possible and convert it as quickly as possible and circulate out the toxins as well, which is why your aerobic work becomes really valuable to your strength work. So hopefully that kind of makes quite a lot of sense to people around there. So feeding back to your point, doing the stuff at the end of it, understand that it's never going to be your max, it's never going to be your highest stress work. There is a real reason why you're so tired and why you can't do those things, as opposed to when you could do them at the beginning. That's why you're tired, because you don't have that pre-stored energy, and your body's basically been not only working itself to get the muscles moving, but also to bring the oxygen in and convert it around into energy as well. So you can have fun at the back end of the session, but don't be looking to get any PBs or high skill returns.
I think it makes perfect sense as well. If you think about it in any other situation, like say you had, I don't know, like a litre of water. At the start of that litre of water, you've got loads of water. But as you slowly drink it, you have less and less water. Like it makes perfect sense. I don't understand like why people could get confused about it even, really. Because obviously at the start of something you're going to have more energy. It makes sense to do the more difficult stuff right at the start. Like to do it the other way around is like,
I think it's just
you're a moose.
You're a moose. I think it's just about understanding the different types of energy as well. It's not all oxygen based, not all work, not all exercise, not all activity is aerobic. Most people have heard the terms anaerobic and aerobic, and it's understanding the difference between the two and how best to utilize those systems. Now, it's not to say that every workout is going to involve a strength component. If you're going out purely to do cardio based work that is going to be predominantly aerobic, or would normally be predominantly aerobic, normally, like we talked about in the stamina component, doing HIIT training, doing interval drills, those, if you're going to throw in any sprints, any things where you really want to try and push yourself to see how fast you can go and measure something as a marker to test yourself against in the future, then that's going to come at the beginning. So you would go and do some sprints first for, a few minutes, and then you break that down into more of a moderate pace jog, and then ease it out to a sort of longer, more steady pace jog for a duration to kind of build the endurance. But don't go for a 20-minute jog and then try and do sprints. I mean, you can do it, but the sprints are just going to suck compared to what they would have done 20 minutes ago. So again, it's understanding, the focus of the program, understanding what you're trying to derive from it, and also how the body's going to best respond versus those things. So I want to get my max deadlift in, it's going to have to come at the beginning of the session. There's no other way around that. It's just not going to work the other way if you throw in a ton of cardio or, lower level unilateral leg drills or handstands or anything else that kind of, precedes that, because it's just going to immediately, every rep, every second is going to detract from your capacity to be able to smash the higher intensity on the more complex lift at the back end.
Yeah.
I think we're done on that.
I think we sorted it. Yeah, I think we know when we should do skills now.
Are you sure? You don't have anything else to add to that?
I think, to be honest with you, I think you should probably try and do them towards the beginning of your session.
You got that, did you?
I think so, yeah. Okay. Right, we're 25 minutes in. Let's talk about how we can develop skills. And because I think that's quite important as well. You can't, a lot of people can't handstand, a lot of people can't do L-sits. So how do you go about developing these skills in your skill session? What's the best way to do it, do you think? And then I'm going to tell you whether you're right or not. This is the Chris test.
Oh, sorry, you're asking me I thought you were asking the audience a question. What was the question again?
Oh, okay, well, I'll talk about it then.
So it's really hard sometimes. I realise I do it myself, that I'm sometimes addressing you and other times I'm talking to the audience. And it's quite hard to know when you say you, whether that's me
you
or
don't know,
them.
I don't know. Sometimes I don't even know and I'm asking the question.
I love the theme of this entire recording has just been professionalism 101 from the very beginning of it. So.
They didn't know about that until now.
No, I know, but we're going to do the outtakes at some point, aren't we?
Okay. Listen to the outtakes. We'll find a way to publish them or stick them in the recording somewhere because they're quite funny.
just have the annual bloopers reel. It was It'll Be All Right on the Night. Do you remember that, or are you too young for that? Maybe.
I don't know. It's kind of skipped out when you said it.
Oh no, it's It'll Be All Right on the Night. It used to be a program where they just do every year. They'd have Dennis Norden, I think, would just kind of do almost like an annual Christmas thing. I think maybe they did it more frequently, but at least there was always one annual special, all the best bloopers from the whole year. So I think if we get a year into this podcast, when we get a year into this podcast, then we'll just do a bloopers reel. Yeah,
it would be funny. We'll keep them all saved.
Well, either that, it's gonna. We think it's great, and we think, people really appreciate that, and we'll just listen back and think, Jesus Christ, maybe we shouldn't really share this.
People stop listening to us. It would be like the fail video of podcasting.
Yeah, podcast fails.
Yeah,
which is probably exactly where we're at right in this moment. So should we get back to it?
Yeah. So skills, when you're learning skills. A lot of the times there are various progressions into achieving them because they're difficult. You can't just do them straight away. That's why they're skills. You have to have a degree of skill to be able to do them. So that means that they take a lot of different elements of your training and mix them all together in some kind of soup and dish it up for you to try. And a bit of salt, bit of pepper. Ta-da, it's called a front lever. And that works across loads of different skills, L-sits will probably be the first kind of one that you learn, and then you go on to muscle-ups and levers and stuff. But it all comes down to working these easier progression exercises, and then as you develop a degree of mastery of each of them, you'll naturally find that you can open up into more of a position moving through those progressions of the front lever. Just because we're using that example, you're starting tucked, you're slowly opening out to an advanced tuck, maybe a single leg lever, going to straddle, and then eventually a full front lever. and I've just done that in about 5 seconds, that's about 6 months of training.
Yeah, it's that easy, you know.
Yeah, it's that easy.
Position 1 on Monday, and then full position by Friday. There you go.
Yeah. So when you're approaching it in your training session, a lot of the times you're not going straight into, you're not like, yeah, so I'm doing my skills training today. I'm going to do, at the start of the session, I'm going to do some front lever training. As soon as you warm up, bang, you can whack out a front lever. Like, it's not quite that easy. But you'll be able to start doing like tucks. You'll be able to start doing advanced tuck. And the idea is to hold these as an isometric exercise for time. So I think I've just lost connection with Chris, but I'm just going to keep talking anyway. So you're developing these you're developing these exercises as you're slowly opening out, as you're slowly getting stronger. You're increasing the length of the lever, and it translates to high strength development across your body, because it takes a lot of strength to be able to do that for the start, but what you're doing is also building coordination and neuromuscular connectivity, that's brain to muscles, and enabling yourself to activate your muscles and move and direct your energy and the force of your muscles in a certain direction, so that you can hold that position. So sticking with the front lever still, when you're doing that lever, you're aiming, in that lock position, you're aiming to bring your hands down into the bar. So it's like a press where you're pressing the bar, essentially, although that's in the fixed position, that's kind of what, imagine you're moving, you're pressing that into your hips so that you can maintain the strength in your arms, and you can tighten up, activate all the muscles correctly to be able to hold that position. So you do that first so that you, help develop that strength and that coordination at the earliest point when you have, like Chris was saying, the most energy. And then as you get later on into your session, you can come back to it in some form of rep or something, because any further exercises that you're doing that are then activating your back or your biceps, or whether you're doing pulls, dips, leg raises, anything, it all translates to working those muscles to a higher degree, because you've already exhausted them to some extent, compared to other muscles in your body, like your quads, for example, which are hardly activated while you're doing tuck lever.
Sounds good.
Yeah. You actually missed half of that.
I did, yeah.
It's okay.
I completely
disappeared. I told everyone about it.
Oh, did you? I look forward to hearing back on that.
No, I didn't. I just said I've lost you, so I'll carry on.
Okay, fair enough. But no, that all sounds pretty straightforward. And I think it's, the greatest lesson about any sort of real high skill work is, more often than not, it is just the need to break it down into requisite parts as well. You know, kind of chunking it down into the smaller pieces beforehand. So, looking into a gym environment, you would take, the most complex lifts that I talked about before. The bigger compound lifts are deadlifts, squats, pull-ups, benches. But then beyond that, you have your more complex more complex Olympic lifts, such as a clean and a snatch, or a clean and jerk and a snatch as well. And you have to build a foundation for that. You have to kind of be able to do a deadlift before you can do either of those. You have to be able to transition a bar from the floor up to the shoulders, or certainly up to a certain height. You then have to get used to driving a bit of power, so sort of throwing the bar up, not necessarily catching it, but getting used to driving the bar from the floor with a lot of power, not just strength, but also speed as well. And then beyond that, you can then start to, at a very low level of intensity, start to look at building in the skill development aspect of actually combining all the, more often than not, 3 parts. I tend to see most of the complexes, or the most complex lifts, broken down into 3 areas, or 3 complete skill set areas. So, once you understand what those actually are, start getting good at each individual one, then slowly start to piece it all together. Does that time with what you were saying?
Yeah, it kind of does. I hadn't quite got into progressions and development in that degree, but that's fine, because you're absolutely right, and it does tie into what I was saying. When if you're doing specific skill training straight at the start, and you're doing your progression work, if you're doing weights, this is the perfect example of how you break it down. if you can't just do a clean and snatch, I've said it now.
A clean and snatch.
I've said a bloody clean and snatch too. And when you do like a clean and jerk, for example, you can't just go in, get your weight and just throw it about because you will injure yourself. It's really important to progress into it just as you do with like body weight training, because and gymnastics or whatever, because if you just throw the weight around and you haven't worked on each of those individual elements of the skill, then you will almost certainly injure yourself, because it does take there are these three pillars, and it's like strength, control and coordination or something. I've bloody forgotten now, but you're right, and breaking it down to these three elements is really important for avoiding injury and also developing the skill. If you don't do them, if you're not isolating these parts, then especially with your weights, then you're not going to be able to develop the requisite strength to be able to do it eventually.
Yeah, and even within, again, coming back to those particular lifts, like the snatch is a perfect example.
The clean and snatch or the regular snatch?
The regular snatch. So, for, as we've mentioned before, it's that drive from the floor, throwing the bar up essentially over your head and kind of catching it in an overhead squat position. Now, for some people, just being able to do an overhead squat is a high enough skill development practice. It's something they need to do a lot of work on, because it's very difficult to safely and comfortably go down into a full squat position while you're holding a bar over your head. That is a challenge in itself, and so therefore that in itself is a skill that needs to be acquired. So a great way of looking at that is, breaking that movement down is first and foremost getting used to being able to squat very much to depth, not just a parallel, because in the snatch, as you'll see when you watch it on TV, on YouTube, people are squatting arse to grass. There's a huge amount of hip flexion going on. The hips position themselves lower than the knee at the bottom of the squat, so the thighs aren't parallel to the floor, they're angled in. So you need to be able to first and foremost squat to that level of depth. You then need to be able, so with weight as well, so doing that in either a front squat or a back squat position, so a loaded position like that, and then just start getting comfortable holding something above your head. And for most people, that will just start with a dowel or a broomstick, a very light Olympic bar, just kind of getting those shoulder positions right, getting comfortable with going down, because it's not as natural a position as you might think. It's not very comfortable for most people to do that, and I end up teaching most people to overhead squat off of a box or a bench to start with, so they've got something to aim for rather than going all the way down to the floor and feeling uncertain as to whether they can come back up safely or not. So that in itself is enough of a skill just to perfect that part of the move, to then go back and actually do the whole movement, so bar up off the floor, thrown up above the head, catching it, squatting it, and then standing back from the squat to finish the move as well. So there's skills within the skill. There's so much detail to it, so it's so important. And this is something that, you and I obviously will advocate all the time is, for any of this high level stuff, you can do a few press ups yourself, do a few pull ups, you can, knock out some lunges and, probably even do a few little basic stands, gymnastic stand positions. But it's so important to have a good coach, someone to give you and have a continuous feedback loop with, someone that can actually look in on your progress, whether it's you submitting videos to them online, whether it's them being there with you in person, to see the things that you don't see, to kind of really get a sense of what's going on and tell you that when you're feeling one thing that you think the position is correct, you're actually doing something completely different, and understanding how to develop that connection between what you're supposed to be doing versus what you're not doing as such, trying to bridge that gap from where you are to where you need to be. So all of this stuff that we're saying, I just kind of feel the need to throw this in when we're especially talking about high level skill work, is that this is the area more than anywhere else that you really need guidance, you really need coaching, you really need someone to assess where you're currently at and then build you out a pathway to where you want to go.
Yeah, you're right. And nothing can get you results like coaching either. And it's not like just trying to sell ourselves to you or anything like that. It's just, it's true. Because unless you have someone who can give you like educated feedback, then you could be learning either the wrong thing and risking injury that way, or learning the right thing badly and risking injuring yourself that way. Or part 3, dun dun dun, you might not get any results at all. And that happens with a lot of people. They try stuff, and because they don't either get help with it and get a trainer or get some guidance, even if it's like you say, like YouTube, even if you just, okay, I don't want to just say you can just go and watch YouTube and learn everything, but you can use, like, there are enough videos of people saying, oh, this is the correct way to do this, or different tips or something, and yeah, a lot of it's contradictory, but you see enough videos of people doing perfect deadlifts or pull-ups, eventually you're going to sift through all the bullshit and all the extra stuff that people chuck in, and you'll learn to do them properly, and you'll learn to get it. So any form of guidance, if it's free or if you're paying for it, obviously getting a coach is going to be a lot better than YouTube, but sometimes you don't have that kind of money laying about. You have other priorities, it's just the truth. So
yeah, and this might sound mildly contradictory, because what we're doing is giving advice on a audio platform. We're trying to share what we know and try and guide people in the right direction. It's why I think this is such an important point, because just because someone's got a podcast, someone's got a YouTube channel, has the capacity to put out videos, put things out into the world, don't assume that they are a great coach. Don't assume they've got the years of experience they may allude to, or they may not allude to at all. They may be completely honest about it, but just because you're seeing them on a screen or hearing them in your ears, don't presume that they're speaking the gospel. Because I see so many things, where people make promises about, if you follow this plan, you'll lose this much weight or you'll get these many gains. The skill of a good coach is to really be able to manage expectations based on the condition of the individual. So it's able to look at someone and say, this is where you're at, averagely speaking, based on the results I've achieved with other people aiming for that particular goal. I think it will take you this long to get to this point. Because when you try things on your own, and I've been there, I'm sure you have too, you try and do things and you don't get a return in like the first week of doing it. So you kind of get a bit bored of it, because you're thinking, shit, surely I should have picked it up by now. And you can kind of start to turn away or start to get disinterested, because you think, I just don't know what to do, or I don't know whether I'm ever going to be able to do this, or maybe I'm missing something, I've got to go and do something else first. Very easy to kind of pull yourself away from it. Whereas if you've got someone mapping out a pathway and saying, by this point, you should, if you follow this plan, be achieving this. By this point, you should be achieving this, again, assuming you follow the plan. And it's all based on your personal current capacity. It's where you are at, not where the average population is at, where the person that they train who's super fit in the gym and picks everything up and is a kind of complete freak because, they're just a natural born athlete, and, that's the sort of clients they work with all the time, and they pick everything up really, really super fast. It's got to be someone who's looking at you and what your actual personal ability is in that moment, and then map out a progressive pathway from that point forward. So don't believe everything you hear, speak to other people. And also the final part of it is there's accountability on both sides. You can't turn around to someone's YouTube video and say, this sucked, it didn't get me anywhere. You can write a comment, but who really reads comments on YouTube? It's only the people that seem to throw away
on YouTube.
It's just like people who just throw around anger and hate. I see so much more negative stuff on YouTube than I would like to think was out there in the world. And it doesn't really hurt anyone, because no one's going to kind of go and read all the comments to kind of ascertain whether you're a good YouTube coach or not. They're just going to kind of take it at face value. Whereas when you have a one-to-one or a club-based environment where, there's a coach leading a multitude of people, but he is still your coach, that person has a degree of accountability, because they're saying you should be getting this by this point if you follow my way of doing it. If you know in your heart of hearts, if you're skipping stuff and cutting corners, then of course, it's on you really, because if they said, here's the plan, follow it and you'll get the result, and you deviate from that, whether it's nutrition or training or whatever, then you have to accept some degree of personal responsibility of that. But if you are following everything to the letter, you can go back to that coach and say, it's not working for me, it's not come out the way. And a good coach will say, okay, fair enough, let's review that, let's pivot, let's look at a different option, let's see if your body will respond better to doing it this way, or we can try and find a workaround. Again, you've got that constant feedback loop both ways. It's a two-way relationship. It's not they say you do, it's they say you do, then you go back and you say what you did, whether it worked, whether it's getting the result, and if not, you work together to continually progress to that result.
Yeah. And I think as this translates back to your skills, you having this plan and having this plan laid out so that you can say, you've got these progressions, you've got these things, you want to achieve a certain skill, it gives you like an arc. And a good coach will always be able to give you I think you can always get a feel for a good coach because they'll be able to express an education simply and teach you very simple ways to and reasons for doing each part of it. And if someone's just throwing something at you and going, yeah, that'll do, then I think you generally get the feel that they're probably not as good as they might be explicit about. And you may find that you're not getting those results. So I think you'll intuitively see if you'll get on with someone as a coach because they'll lay something out for you and give you good reason and clear explanation on why each part is so important.
Yeah, definitely, and it's just great to have someone else invested in your success as well.
Yeah, because it's fun and like you've got someone else going. Yeah, I this is one thing I love about coaching. Right, I know we're talking about skills, but I love seeing someone achieve something and then like they're coming to you and they're going, oh, I can do it, and it's like it's almost having like it's like it gives you such a good sense of like achievement in just helping someone. Do you know what I mean? You're like, yeah, because man, I get so happy when people learn stuff. Like, and when someone comes to me and go, yeah, look, I got my handstand, or oh yeah, I can do my back lever now, and I see it, man. Like, I love fucking cheering them on and bloody. Do you know what I mean? Celebrating with them. That's what it's about, man. It's about supporting someone, and having that support system will help you achieve definitely.
Oh, massively. Yeah. And it's great as a coach because it's just validation of your work. You know, it's that you are a good coach. You actually know what you're talking about. You actually are able to help people, and that's so rewarding. So for the coach's sake, go and get a coach because we love good clients.
Get us for us. Yeah.
Anyway,
but so this. You don't need necessarily to have a coach though to achieve skills. You need to approach it with a mindset that it's going to take time. On my bigger articles on the page, I try and set out like a time scale for achieving it, and I've got like a kind of flow of skills you will achieve as you develop and as you train, because you need to have certain strength prerequisites or skill prerequisites to be able to achieve harder and more complex skills, which take more coordination and more power. So it's not like you can go, I haven't got my L-sit, but I can go into a back lever or something like that, or I haven't got my L-sit, but I can start doing planche training, because you won't have the strength and the necessary coordination and neuromuscular ability to be able to do that movement and hold that position for any kind of time, if you can even get there. Because there are so many tiny little tweaks that you probably won't know about unless you have helped someone else learn this. You know, there are these certain little skills, and that's why things like leg raises are so important, and tuck leg raises as well, tuck toe taps. If you check out, I got an article on hanging leg raises progressions, right? And in there's tuck toe taps is one of the best exercises you can do for like rotator cuff and press strength, to be able to build up those tiny little muscles that are pivotal in your ability to move, but hardly ever get the required training because they're so delicate and so like tiny little muscles that everyone ignores them and they just look at their biceps or their delts.
I couldn't tell whether your mic went funny there or whether you were just doing a silly voice.
I kind of just accidentally went into that silly voice.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool, as long as it's not the connection falling again.
Yeah.
Little muscles.
Little muscles. That's probably what it sounded like. Fucking hell.
No, it's a great point, you know, because you can achieve certain positions and perform certain activities, particular movements, without doing certain elements of the prep, without doing certain elements of the progressions. So you can, again, in a gym, you can do a deadlift without, you know, having a very straight back, or having a very good core control or scapular setting, or all the kind of little details about, you know, getting a range of movement through the hips and all that sort of stuff. You can lift a weight from the floor. You know, what's the return on that? Well, it's, you know, at best, it's just a very bad looking deadlift. At worst, it's a perforated, it's a prolapsed disc in your back, you know, because you've not set the right foundations. Equally, yeah, handstands are a great example, aren't they? You know, because for some people that is a really high skill pursuit early on in their training, particularly gymnastics work, you know, just to get to that point. So many people can do a handstand in terms of they can stand on their hands, but whether it looks very good or not, or they're just in this complete banana-y mess where, you know, their feet are almost back on the floor because they're kind of bent double over trying to sort of maintain that position. So, you know, the failing is that, you know, the positions can be achieved, the movements can be achieved to some extent. It's just a very low quality level, like you were saying. And it's where it's, even when you're getting frustrated because you're like, oh, this is just such low level skill development work. You know, we're talking about enhancing our rotator cuff strength or our hip mobility or whatever it might be. It's so worth it. It's so worth it.
It's necessary. You can't do you can't do a planche or like a front lever or a flag without having strong shoulders. That's where the lever is.
Yeah, for stuff like that, it's, you know, there's no way of cheating it, is there? But for some other stuff, there may be, and people can say, oh, I can do that, but they just can't.
And there are ways of cheating it for other exercises as well, but you're going to injure yourself. And when you injure yourself, because you will, because your body isn't strong enough. Yeah, so when you, like, you see a lot of people do front levers with their arms bent, like, do you know what I mean? So they're kind of like halfway doing a pull-up.
Yeah.
And their hips are sagging a little bit, and it's a terrible positioning. You can kind of get away with that because if your body opens out, it's not really going to do a lot of damage. It's just going to open out and you're going to be hanging. Yeah, but in a back lever, the risks are much higher, even though it's a lesser degree of strength and skill development. It's earlier in the overall progression of different skills you can learn. It's the issue you can have with it is massive, you know. And like you're saying, handstands, they're a great example, but they're also the outlier because you learn them really quickly, but they take a long time to master, because a lot of people, as you can say, can kind of do handstands. They're probably really bad form, and you could probably correct the form in a relatively short period of time, but if you just learn the handstand straight away in a good position, there are like 3 little pointers I can give you, 3 little exercises that you're going to do in various forms, whether it's the into or out of the mount or the dismount of the exercise. You can have them in half hour. So it's really quick to learn because it's not massively strength, although it does take a lot of coordination, and the handstands are hard, don't get me wrong, but they don't take a lot of progression exercises to achieve because they don't take as much strength. So there's not like an increase in lever like there is in like the planche or the human flag or, you know, stuff like that. Yeah. So that's the difference.
No, huge difference. And it also, what you said there, I think it kind of leads into another thing that, you know, once you've got a position, once you've developed a movement to the extent that you can do it, and you do it well, certainly, and by well I mean with a very low risk of injury, which is obviously the paramount concern here, that people don't hurt themselves, that they can continue to develop on these things, is just that. It's the ongoing pursuit of excellence in any particular area. There is no perfect, you know, or at least, you know, it's very rare that someone's going to do a perfect version of everything. You know, they'll lift the most amount of weight they've ever lifted, or they'll hold a handstand or a back lever or whatever, or a planche for as long as they possibly can. But, you know, the pursuit of all of this is really just ongoing development, is always trying to better yourself, you know, trying, whether it's looking in a broader capacity, if you're a, you know, high level athlete, certainly you're looking to break records and, you know, get ridiculously high scores for particular routines and whatnot. But it's also about high score. It's also about, you know, and this is what I love from, that I've, you know, derived from martial arts all these years, is particularly good martial arts as well. It's always not being so arrogant to think that just because, well, I've learned that basic foundational move, now I don't need to go back to that, because the foundational moves, you know, the real basic stuff, or the earlier things that you learn, you know, often build the pillars on which everything else is built, you know. So going back and perfecting your handstand once you've learned how to do a handstand, and not just performing it, but really feeling into it, you know, really understanding what's going on in the body, trying to learn from people who are even more advanced into, you know, how your shoulders should be feeling, what you should be feeling in the core, what it looks like, again, getting that feedback loop, whether it's filming yourself, getting someone else to tell you what it looks like, or filming it for you, constantly refining the process, constantly feeling in. Sometimes you'll discover something wholly different to anything you've ever experienced before in a particular exercise or activity. That's where the ongoing fun is, because once you've got to the point where you can do the lift, you can perform the skill-based move, then after that it's just getting really good at it. Whatever that means to you, whether it's more weight, more time in the position, or just a great degree of accuracy in the hold, in the movement itself. It's so valuable. That's where you get some huge returns, and just going back to basics over and over again, never forgetting how important a push-up can be, to kind of develop certain things, and just feeling into it in a different way than you would have otherwise ever before. That can be as much as a reward of anything, because it's just pursuing perfection, but it's certainly just, seeking excellence in absolutely every possible thing you've ever learned, and always going back and just, as I said before, refining that process.
Yeah, and I think another cool thing about like bodyweight training is that once you just learn one skill, it's not just having one skill. You can do variations, you can do transitions into other exercises and other skills, and it unlocks a whole new bunch of exercises that you can do, like this kind of like a tree of progressions. Do you know what I mean? Each skill you get gives you like 5 more skills you can do, and then you get one of those skills and gives you another 5 skills that you can do. And as you develop and as you progress on these basic foundations, that you can build higher and higher in terms of complexity and the challenge, the physical challenge of any particular move or exercise or whatever. So although even like skills can take high degree of strength and training to get into, once you get into them, there's like the next level, and then there's the next level, and then there's the next level. So it can be, like, as an example of a pull-up, there's not just doing a pull-up and then doing a muscle-up in a progression of skill, or doing a pull-ups and dips and then suddenly you can do a muscle-up. There's the pull-ups, there's variations of pull-ups you can do to build different strength and different levels of coordination, challenge your body in different ways to build other types of strength and work slightly more and target slightly more different muscle groups in your body. So like you could do archer pull-ups, or you can do like typewriters, which are like a combination between a normal pull-up and like, you stay above the bar and you move across to like the archer position on either side. You're like bang, back and forth, back and forth. You can't just do that straight away, and you can't do archers straight away. You got to do your pull-ups. You got to like learn to kind of get out and about. So as you focus in on each skill in the progression, there are other little skills you have to work on, and like it can make your training so complex, but it keeping it at those simple foundations, knowing you're heading towards this skill, you can break down these movements in your workout. So after you've worked your skill, you can pull it in different forms of exercise to like target those muscles and endure in that movement and in that kind of static strength position that you need to then require to be able to build on to the next level.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. Love it. And I like the tree of progression visual.
Yeah.
That really got me thinking. I was like, oh yeah,
yeah, it is. It's like
works.
Yeah. Like if you can do an L-sit or you can do a hanging leg raise, then what's the next thing after a hanging leg raise? You can do like one arm hanging leg raises. You can do wipers. You can do hanging leg raises, pull-ups. So you actually do a toe tap and then pull-ups at the bar right into your hips. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So, like that's another different exercise you can do, which is totally different. It challenges your body in totally different ways to a leg raise. Because you're mixing it, and that's different to a pull-up leg raise kind of, example of a compound movement that I was saying about supersets earlier. So there's loads of different ways you can train skills outside of that skill training zone right at the beginning of your session. You can pull it later on into your session by moving back to these progression exercises, or like focusing on one element of it and then trying to move around in that position and like creating a new dynamic movement around an isometric or like a hold exercise, like an L-sit. You can try doing flutter kicks of it. So in your L-sit position, start kicking your legs up and down like you would doing flutter kicks on the floor or a bench. But in an L-sit, boom, skill mania.
Oh, brilliant. I think that's actually quite a good note to wrap it up on. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think so. Because there's there's so much shit you can do with skills, and we can talk about different elements of working skill training into any kind of session. But I think we've summed it all up in the last minute and a half.
Yeah, and ironically, it took us an hour to get there. But that's the way it goes. But
you need
sometimes
to talk about it as well. And you need to bring in other perspectives and counter arguments and caveats to each explanation.
Yeah, it's all about progression, isn't it? As we said.
Yeah.
I think we said that anyway, didn't we? Yeah, I think we mentioned something about progression.
Maybe right at the start.
Yeah, like really briefly. So anyway, no, that's a great way to wrap it up. And look, as with all of these
words, you do the outro.
As always with these episodes, my last point was going to be that we're always going to touch back in on this stuff. These are the sort of foundational episodes that we want to kind of share some real core information with you and our sort of core beliefs around those particular areas as well. So these are things we're going to come back up with time and time again. Could always reference back to, always talk about. It's fundamentally everything that training is about. So we'll go into all this stuff in a bit more detail in future episodes. But for today, if you like what you've heard, please do head on over to iTunes to leave a rating and review, to let other people find the show, to certainly help other people find the show, and also to give yourself a little bit of good karma as well. If you do want to reach out to us in any way, shape or form, whether it's to come on and chat with us on the show, or just to ask a question, or just to point out where we're bumbling and failing and tripping over ourselves so miserably that we can't even tell, but you maybe can, because any show is only as good as its audience, and so we require that feedback loop, much like in a coaching capacity, as much as we do with our training clients. So please do give us that feedback. Let us know what you'd like to hear more of, less of, possibly extended outros. You may want to hear less of this, but anyway,
I think longer outros is better.
Definitely. But if you want to reach out, get in touch with us via social media. You can find me as Coach Thatch. You can find Rhys as More Than Lifting. You can head on over to morethanlifting.com to check out all of the stuff that Rhys referenced today and find out a bit more information about how you can get started with any of the particular skill development work that you want to do. But for today, I believe that's everything. What do you say, Rhys?
Before we go, I just wanted to talk about... no, I'm joking. I'll let it rambling for another 5 minutes. No, Chris, you said it perfectly, mate.
I was genuinely scared that you were going to go off on one again. I was like, I've got to go out now.
Yeah, I'm running into the loo. Anyway. No, that's everything, guys. Keep in touch with yourselves. Check out the site, like Chris said. Give us some love on iTunes, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Yeah, cheers, guys. Have a good one. Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.